So I just remembered to hit record. So I missed the introduction part, but now I'm recording. And so Nancy, I'm going to hand it over to you. What you all need to do so that you can see her well is you're probably on gallery view. You need to go to speaker view. So you'll want to go to full screen, and instead of gallery view, you want to select speaker view so that she'll be the big one, and that's who you'll see. So if everybody could do that and then give me a thumbs up when you're kind of on speaker view, then that way I'll know everyone's ready. Okay, Nancy, it is yours.
All right, well, thank you, Rebel. And I tell you, it's just been really great having these Zoom education opportunities, because I feel like I've really done well on getting my continuing education done this year. And so it's been a real plus in terms of our quiet time at home. So as Rebel said, I am a teacher, and I did get my degree from the University of Texas in Austin, and it was in theater. And my specialty was technical theater, and my specialty within that was props. And I always loved that. I wanted to go into the art department, but they were really serious over there. And the other thing that happened was I was in a life drawing class, and I was coming from Abilene, Texas, and this was the University of Texas at Austin. And my first or second class, this little man that I'd seen on the drag and thought was homeless came into class, and then all of a sudden he took it, he dropped his clothes off, and all of a sudden we were supposed to be drawing him, and I was just a little too freaked out about all that. So I found out that over in the theater department there probably wasn't going to be an issue of nudity, and they seemed a lot more relaxed about having a good time and also getting an education. And that was pretty much the order I put my college in. So when I got out of the University of Texas and had, real life start happening, I needed something that would actually bring funds into my bank account. And so I went back and got my teaching certificate as an elementary education teacher. I taught at Austin Elementary, 3rd grade, and then I taught in San Antonio, 4th grade. And I enjoyed those days. I then became a homeschooling mother and did that for many, many years. And in the process of raising our last child, I got back to one of my first loves, which was painting. And went into really studying that, and then started teaching again as an art teacher here in Abilene. And so we were going to do this in my studio, but my Wi-Fi connection out there isn't very good. But so you don't have to think about what's behind me. I'm going to just show you. These are a couple of my pieces of art. There's the bride, and then there's an abstract. That's kind of a scripture ink thing I do. And then the 2 children behind me are my grandsons, Cooper and Jonathan. And the thing right behind me is a Van Morrison poster from Las Vegas back when we could all travel. My husband and I did that for an anniversary trip. So now you know what's behind me, and you don't have to think too hard about that. Also, as far as training goes, one of the things I've gotten to do was to work with Amy Black out at Gold Monarch Center, and became a trained heart sync minister. And this is where you work with people who've experienced traumas, and you use a process which really involves their faith to have them experience healing. And one of the components of that is, as an artist, to paint for that person who's receiving the session, whatever the Lord lays on my heart to paint for them. And I never know what it means. I mean, I'm usually very confused as to why I'm painting what I'm painting. But then when I hear from that person what it means to them, it's amazing what the connections are and how the Lord uses that. And that's when I really started to realize how art and trauma were connected. I also, because of the past entertaining past that I've had, the Austin 6th Street sort of background that I've had, and the teenage years that I experienced personally, my heart has been for teenage girls. So as a CASA, those have been the cases that I've really wanted to be a part of, the last few children that I've had. And that's one of the things I'm really excited about this conversation today, is that we're all advocates, basically. I mean, there might be some staff, but even our staff are advocates. So it's very comfortable for me to be with you guys and to realize that we are all in the same fight. You know, we're all in the same place of advocating for our kids. And so what I have really two goals for you guys today. I want you to be able to use art to build a bridge with your CASA children, but I also want you to understand a little bit about trauma. And so, as I was saying, art is a bridge. It's a connector. And it's like the magic bean. If you can get some crayons, some markers, some pencils, some paper, some scissors, and just lay it out, the magic will happen. And so there's lots of different situations that we can use art, and we're going to talk about trauma, but I want to share with you guys something that happened in my case just at Christmas. I have 3 girls in this case, and the youngest, it was 6 years old at Christmas, and she was with a family that was going to, was planning to adopt her, and then when the trial didn't go the way we wanted it to, they decided, no, we don't want, we're backing out, and she was in placement with them, and they also wanted her to be moved to a different placement. And so all of a sudden she was being moved to a family member or kinship placement that she didn't know at all. She had really never met this family, and they had a 7-year-old daughter. And so I was just really trying hard to decide, how's this going to work? And my CBS worker happened to not be in town. So it was like, it could have fallen, I guess, on somebody from the department to do that transition. But I felt like it was my place as CASA to help her move comfortably and for it not to be another trauma in her life. And so I realized, well, 7 years old girls, let's paint. And so I actually had access to a studio and nobody was there. We were able to bring the girls in. One family was saying goodbye, one family was saying hello, and we just had the girls, sit down and paint together. And so this is a picture of them, and that was the bridge. There were smiles and fun and no tears, which tears would have been okay, but there were no tears. And the girls sort of had this common ground where they could play for a little bit before she got in the car with the family and then went to Carrizo Springs, pretty far away. So again, I was just so grateful that I could use art as the bridge to connect them. And I think that there's lots of places like that where we don't have a major, we're not trying to uncover anything. We're just trying to give people a place to connect. Next point is that you do not have to be an artist to do this. I think it's important for you to know a little bit about stuff, what to get. In fact, if you look at this painting picture, those are Crayola watercolors. And I think Crayola is really one of the best for children. the quality of the paint is good. It's not too watery. And so, and it's inexpensive. So if you were going to do watercolor, which is really fun until people want to try and paint something that looks like something, and then watercolor is really difficult. But for abstract and just fun painting, children love watercolors. Teenagers, not so much. The other thing I'll just say, I'm going to give you all little hints along the way in this talk. The brushes that they put, these are not the brushes they put in the, you get one brush with a little watercolor set like that, and it's usually just a piece of trash. And so usually I will buy a set of, again, Crayola has a set of watercolor brushes. There's like 4 of them, different sizes, and I think it's like $2.99 or so. I mean, they're very inexpensive, but they're better than the one that's in there. So the less frustration you have with the materials, the more successful you'll be with using art, because it's just like anything, you know, you kind of want to know where the problems might be and solve them before you get there. Again, I was saying, you don't have to be an artist. And what I usually tell people who want to talk about art with me, and they're, oh, I'm not an artist. And I'm like, okay. And if they're a person of faith, this is what I will say to them. Do you believe or read the Bible? And they'll usually say, oh yeah, absolutely. And I'll say, well, okay, in Genesis, what does it say about God? And in the very beginning, and it's like, well, he created all these things. Yes, he did. And then what does it say about man? And they'll think about it and they'll look it up. And it's really good if I have a Bible and they look it up. And it says, God created them, male and female. He created them in his image. Point made. You know, it's like, you cannot say that you're not creative if you're a believer, because you're creative. And really, every human being is created in the image of God. So everybody has creativity, and creativity is just the motivating factor behind just taking a leap into using things that you might not be comfortable with. There's a difference between creativity and comfort. So here's what I want to say to you. Trust the process, okay? Also, I especially if I'm doing something intentional, I spend some time praying before I move into that. Like if I know I'm going to meet with a child and we're going to do something, then I will spend time praying before we meet, you know, that the Lord would use that experience to give them more healing, more comfort, more wholeness. And then really one of the most important things, and this is something you guys all do really well, is listen. You know, just listen, because kids really like to talk about what they're doing, like what they're making and what it means to them. And then I think that the second part of that listening is to then reflect back to them what you heard them say, just to clarify it and to validate them, like you heard them and they created something and you saw it, and you're going to acknowledge it, and you're going to make a big deal, you know, without freaking them out, you know. So creative expression, it's also an important piece of traumatic intervention. And I'm going to read to you guys something for a minute, and I'm sorry I don't like reading things, and I hate it when people used to read to me in teacher meetings, but it's easier for me to, there's names, and so if I read this. But I want to make a point about how creative expression has been used for children. And so this was in Africa in a place called Darfur. Human Rights Watch researchers, Dr. Annie Sparrow and Oliver Burkow, visited Chad in February 2005 to assess the issues of protection and sexual violence in the refugee camps along the Darfur-Chad border. In her work as a pediatrician, Dr. Sparrow habitually asks children to draw while she talks to their parents or guardians. She did the same thing in Darfur. While Burkow and Sparrow spoke with parents, teachers, and camp leaders, the children drew. and without any instruction or guidance, the children drew scenes of their experience of the war in Darfur, the attacks of the Janjaweed, the bombings by Sudanese government forces, the shootings, the burning of entire villages, and the flight of Chad. As Sparrow and Burkall visited schools and refugee camps in Chad, many children between the ages of 8 and 17 shared the drawings they had done in their school notebooks, often alongside their lessons in Arabic or math. School children from 7 refugee camps in the border town of Tyne offered Human Rights Watch researchers hundreds of drawings in the hope that the rest of the world would see their stories as described in their own unique visual vocabulary of war. And so I want to show you just a couple. You can Google this and you can see all the drawings, but so I'll give you a second to kind of look at that. So this says, this picture is by Muhammad, shows another village attack. Next to each civilian who has been shot is the word morts, which means dead people in French. And then this one. It takes a few minutes to kind of see what's all on there. These are very intricate drawings. And this was by a 15-year-old. Adam, 15, shows shot civilians' bodies being tossed into the river. On the back of the drawing, he wrote, "Look at these pictures carefully and you will see what happened in Darfur. Thank you." What occurred was that they saw these pictures that these children had drawn, and then even later when they were in I don't even know when they were in court for war crimes, the pictures were actually used as evidence. And that's a very dramatic example of how art, just really a box of crayons and a piece of paper, opened the door for kids to express themselves. So that creative act was giving a voice to them. And a lot of times there is either self-imposed silence or a silence that's imposed by other people. And now if you kind of think about this with our kids in CASA, many of our kids have experienced circumstances and situations where they are not allowed to express that or don't know how. Really, it's that they don't know how. It used to be that it was better to forget traumatic experiences. That was a philosophy many years ago. And the reason I know that is because my son had a traumatic experience when he was 2 years old. And I had just as much counsel telling us to not pursue any kind of counseling as I did to pursue it. And there was just a lot of feelings about a child that young, and really play therapy was just starting to be a thing. And so I really loved Rebecca's talk on play therapy, and I'm a huge, huge play therapist advocate. But eventually they thought that the children would stop thinking about these nightmarish memories. Well, the body is a funny thing, and it will push those memories down, but they're not released. They're still in that child's body. Fortunately, I think the much more common practice now in counseling is the importance of acknowledging and validating, and then finding that mental health intervention that's going to work with that child and help them release and heal these places that they have been traumatized. So this is the major point I guess I want y'all to get. And that is that trauma memories are sensory memories. When a trauma occurs to somebody. And y'all can check this out personally with yourselves. If you want to think about a traumatic experience you've had, just, you know, check this out. But when the trauma occurs, the senses are usually being assaulted, whether it's eyes, ears, nose, mouth, hands. The senses are usually involved in a trauma. And so when that memory of a trauma comes up, that the person is going to feel and they're going to react with their bodies to the memory. And so what art does, which is just, God is just so good to give us so much, but art allows a person to use their senses, their sight, their hands, depending on what they're using. They could be using their smell. If they're musicians, their hearing. But art gives a way to process that trauma with your senses. And so there's a different level of healing that occurs by using art. And there's lots and lots of brain science now. That's another thing that is just amazing. But the traumatized brain is constantly on high alert. So if you have a CASA case and you know that there was some pretty intense trauma involved, think about that child and just, you know, ask, do they seem like they're on high alert? Because it's very possible that that's sort of their survival mode in the way they're living. And what happens is that the lower regions of the brain are really being called into play. And so as people who want to see healing and a place of peace, for us to understand how we can help calm that is just a gift. And art, drawing, and also working with clay is very soothing to the lower parts of the brain. Now, there are other kids who need to move and dance and wave a silk banner, you know, that is what they need. So just sort of understanding and seeing your CASA case, seeing your child, knowing them, you'll know if this is something that would benefit them or not. So a picture can tell a story about our internal life that isn't accessible in words. And that's exactly what we saw with the drawings from Darfur. And I had like the most wonderful experience to get to experience this, with our friend Zoe. And a lot of you guys know Zoe through trainings. I have known Zoe as just kind of a girlfriend for about 7 or 8 years. And about 5 years ago, I also got to work with her as a heart sync minister. And we came into it. There was another heart sync minister named Sue Schutte. Some of y'all know Dr. Schutte. And this is his wife, Sue. She's an amazing healer. And then Jeanette was also participating with us when we would have these times with Zoe. And my part in it was the art component, because for Zoe, it was very hard to come to that place of calm, and the art really helped her. And so Jeanette and Zoe have both know that we're talking about them, or I'm talking about them today. And I had a nice long conversation with Zoe yesterday. And she says, this was her quote. She says, "When my heart can't say the words, my hands and the paint say the words for me." And so I want to show you guys one of Zoe's drawings. And we would draw alongside each other. I would be praying, Lord, show me what to draw. And she would be drawing whatever was on her heart, mind, and spirit. And, you know, we were just kind of both moving through, and we were being taught. Sue was teaching us and talking about some things at the same time, and Jeanette was probably praying for most of the time that we were working on these things. But if you look at this picture, you can see this is not a great piece of art. I mean, this is, we're not using art to make masterpieces. We're using art to give a child an opportunity to release something. And I'm pretty sure that all of y'all can see that quite a bit was released in this drawing. Now, my job isn't to interpret it, and your job won't be to interpret it either. The coolest thing about a drawing is that you can ask questions. You know, and just a thought, whatever your mind and eyes are drawn to first, don't make that the first thing you ask a question about. Because like in the drawing I just showed you, all that black, you know, it's like so obvious, and it's like, oh my gosh. But instead, you know, to come back with a, well, tell me, like in that picture, I would say, well, let's see if I can point to it over here. Yeah, I'd say, so this looks, at first I'd say something like, oh my goodness, this is so much energy. God, there is a lot going on in this picture. You have really captured so many things. And then I would go and I'd say, but tell me about this little piece right here. And then I just shut up. I'm sorry, we're probably not supposed to use that word, but I would be quiet and I would listen. And depending on what your child, I mean, Zoe could probably talk for an hour about that. And, you know, I'm just listening. And what I'm doing in the listening is I'm trying to find the places where I can encourage her, where I can claim victory. I don't want to focus on the bad stuff. I want to focus on whatever victory I can find in that. I mean, I'm not saying you don't acknowledge the bad stuff, you have to. And that's another thing I just wanted to say is that if you have an outcry, which, you know, depending on the safety a child feels, that could happen. I have not had that happen to me because the kids have known what happened to them or that sort of thing. But if you were to have an outcry through a drawing and that sort of thing, you just follow the protocol. You know, you don't want to go too far into that. You want to make sure that the authorities are alerted and that everything, because you want to make sure that that child is given every opportunity to have their full legal rights in it. And I don't think I really need to say too much more about that. Like I said, that is not something that I've ever had happen, but it could. And so I just thought I should probably address it. Okay, so you saw the picture that I just showed you of Zoe. So I'm going to show you another picture Zoe did. Very simple, not as chaotic. And I don't know if you can see, she wrote Zoe on the palm of the hand. And so I used a verse from Isaiah 49:16 when I made this book for Zoe. It says, "See, I have engraved you on the palms of my hands." But I want you to just think about this painting now. Same child, a little bit further down the road. But I want to show you another piece, and Rebel has already screenshotted this, and she's going to send it to you. Colors have meanings, and you can Google this, and you can go way far down a rabbit hole. I try and keep it really simple. And I also don't always go straight to these interpretations of color. I just you know, but some of it is kind of obvious. I love that black can also mean mystery. I think that is really, because I don't know if you've worked with teenagers much, but a lot of teenagers I know really like black. And so it gives me a place to say something like, oh, that's a great, you know, that's mystery and wonder. And you know, then I kind of go off again, trying to find the positive high road. But so with Zoe and that painting, if you look at yellow, it could be fear or it could be hope. And it can be both. You know, when Zoe and I talk about stuff like that, we'll talk about both parts of that. Red can be sacrifice or salvation, but it can also be anger. And to give her permission to express what she thinks about whatever happened to her, or what, you know, it's very important to leave the door pretty open for the child to express whatever they do. You know, once they have drawn something, then the words they seem to flow. And so that's how, you know, these things can be used. All right. So I talked to you about color interpretation. Now I'm going to show y'all one of my favorite things to do with kids. And this is probably the most powerful art material for kids. Really, teenagers even love this stuff. I've used this in Israel with a bunch of teenagers. I couldn't speak Hebrew, they couldn't speak English, and we were able to do some fun stuff. But these are just pipe cleaners. And so what I do, and I'm missing yellow and purple, just so you know, I'm aware I don't have those in here. Not on purpose. I just didn't have them out in the studio. And so what I'll do, and I used to do this at Art Walk when kids would come, or really anyone would come in, I'd just ask them, I'd say, hey, you want to make some jewelry? And they're like, oh yeah. And so I tell them to pick. You can do up to 5. I tend to go with 3 just because it seems to be easier, especially for small children. 3 is more doable. And so you say, just pick 3 pipe cleaners. And I don't ever tell them which ones to pick, because that's the key, is to see what they go for. So green is my favorite color. Has been ever since I was ever since I could probably say green. I've loved green. And so what you do, and I'm going to show you how to make this piece of jewelry. And if you've ever been around Latimer, she's a downtown artist. She does this a lot too. But so you take it, and in the middle, you just twist, 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 and you get about an inch or an inch and a half of twisted part. Like that. And then you ask the child, and a lot of the older kids can all do this themselves. You don't have to do this for them. You show them, do one, and let them do theirs. And with the smaller children, I will measure their finger for them. And you take it around, and then you twist the top, but you have to kind of be a little bit loose, because you don't want to hurt their finger. So just know that, don't get it so tight, because then it, you know, hurt as it comes off. But then once you do that, you pull these out, and you have this little ring with these funny little places. And then you pull this out like a bicycle wheel, or spokes on a wheel. So it looks like that, spider. And then you just basically, you know, have them do whatever they want. My favorite thing is just to roll them, and I roll them up. And well, it's also great if you have the sparkly ones, and let them have one sparkle, or kind of depending on what you're, you know, if you're like at Art Walk, I usually have a lot of, so I'm just like, okay, you can have one sparkle, because otherwise they'll take all sparkles. But if it's just you working with a person, so I'm taking a pencil and I'm just rolling, and that makes a little spring-like thing. So I've got the snail shell and the spring, and you just basically do that with all of these and then they can play with it. And so they're so concerned and thinking about the ring that they're making that they don't really realize that they've made some choices by choosing the 3 colors that they did. And so when they get finished and it's on, and I tell them, you know, how beautiful it is and how wonderful, and I'm like, oh, by the way, do you know what the colors mean that you chose? And they're like, usually they don't have a clue what I'm talking about. And so I'll say, well, green is for life. And so you are dedicated to living and to being alive. And, you know, for our kids, sometimes they just need to hear someone say, you're gonna live, and you're gonna live well. And so you end up, here's the little ring, and they've got it on their finger, and they're like, ooh. And then I'll say something about blue, blue being a very spiritual color of the heavens, and gold is, you know, we say the streets of heaven are going to be gold. And most people know that I pretty much couch everything within my knowledge of the Bible and God. And that's just how I live. And I kind of tell them that from the get-go. I'm like, you know, all I can tell you is what I know, and this is how I see things. But it's not a it's not a religious thing. So this ring is just fun for them, and then from there they'll start making bracelets and all kinds of stuff. But that's really my very favorite thing to just start with, you know, like, because it's super easy and it's not at all messy. Now let's go to the other side of the spectrum. This is the most wonderful thing to children. Can y'all see what it is? And do I hear a collective oh out there? Because everybody knows this is also this will be around forever. And it's really nice. I talked to Rebel beforehand, and I said, Rebel, is it possible that we could have an art space up at the CASA office where we could come and create with our kids? And she said yes. And so there is the possibility to use glitter in your future if you so desire, but children love glitter, and you can sprinkle it in on top of wet paint. You can use it in so many ways, and it is probably the messiest of messies. So there's the 2 ends of the spectrum. From there, I guess I want to show you about, you know, when you're working with a young person, and you guys already know this, you've already done this. The first step is to establish safety. Well, you guys all have relationships with your kids where you've already done that. But if you just want something simple to do, most of you guys have access or could find like a rubber duck, you know, little yellow rubber ducky, and they make them in green and purple and blue and pink and all the different colors, but you can probably find a rubber duck somewhere. So you take that rubber duck, and you can do this out at the park. You know, there's 2 different ways you can do this that I've used it. You can take it out at the park, and you can say, hey, let's build a safe place for this rubber ducky. And then you just listen, and they're like, oh, it needs this for that, and it needs this for that. And you start to hear what's on that child's heart. What does a safe place look like to that child for that rubber ducky? Because it's probably the same thing they'd like to have in their lives. And then if it's an older child, or if say you're not, you know, you don't have lots of little feathers and dirt and sticks and all that around, you can just take a piece of paper and crayons and say, hey, this is Rubber Ducky Bill, and Rubber Ducky Bill needs to have a home. Can we draw a home, and what would it look like? And I mean, some of these boys will draw you maps of the pond and the bridge, and you know, you'll be amazed at what a child's imagination, where it will go, and just the sweet things you'll learn about that child and their heart just by listening to their plan for the rubber ducky. All right, so here's a couple, the rest of the time, which is just a few more minutes, I'm going to show you guys a couple of other opportunities, ways you can use art. I'm trying to keep it super simple because, again, this isn't about being an artist, it's about using creativity. So over spring break, I have teenage girls as well, and one of the things I did with them was a thing called, I just call it word art. And the way you can introduce it is to just find a book that has lots of sweet adjectives in it and read the book together. And I think the simpler, the better. I love children's books. I love the little bit, you know, less writing is more for me. And so the simpler the book, the better. But if it's about feelings or emotions or any, like I said, adjectives, this book has lots of fun words like whirling, spinning, glittering, sparkling, waiting. I mean, you can pull so many words. So whatever you do, you want to have kind of an opener to introduce words. And you tell them from the get-go, now we're going to be listening for words. And we're going to ask, and again, with my CASA kids, I already have this relationship where I can say to them, we're going to ask Holy Spirit to give us words. And so you don't have to say that out loud. You can just pray, Holy Spirit, give that child a word. And so then you read and then afterwards say, okay, did anything stand out to you? And they will say, you know, they might say, yes, hope was my word. And so these little vinyl stick-on letters are really easy to use. And so what you do is you can get super cheap canvases and super cheap craft paint and do this. And so you do an underpainting, which obviously in this one was the orange and the red and the yellow, very abstract. Then you put your letters on and you can put, you know, they can do whatever they want. And then you do an overpainting. And then you just peel off the letters and they have a piece of art. This is really good for teenagers that they will hang on their wall. And so, and I think this is really one of the I mean, like, I adore this piece. I would put that on my wall. So, and like I said, you can buy this stuff super, super cheap. And so this girl made 3. And then she was going to give some away. I just love their heart for stuff like that. So that's called word art. And then another sort of version of that is taking watercolor, and you can make these sort of abstract watercolors. There's nothing going on this. You can turn it whatever way you like. But it's just abstract. And then what I do is just buying a set of rubber stamp letters. Then the child can stamp in whatever words or, you know, whatever they want to. If they want to write a little affirmation to themselves, if they want to write words, they can. These are real easy. You just, instead of using ink, you can just take a little brush and paint on the letters and stamp them, and it just stamps paint. So I did this, and I did this out at the ranch in Goldthwaite. So it's really easy to take. And this was hers. And, you know, I want you to see the smile on these kids' face. They like art. And then this is what it actually says. It's got faith and hope and love on there. And I tell you, to be in the room and have that be what she created, it just broke my heart and exploded my heart, because I could have tried for months to get her to a place, and art got her there like that. And I didn't really do anything except bring the materials and show up and let her go. You know, kids are very independent and they will take off with this stuff. A few other ideas are to take something like this and then just tear it up. I mean, kids, if you give them permission to tear it up, they are like, there's something very healing about ripping up. And especially if you are painting and you're saying, let's paint anger. What makes us angry? Let's paint an anger. And so you've got red and yellow and whatever, and it's this big, ugh. And you're like, oh, good, now let's tear it up. And so then, you know, you end up with all these sort of torn pieces. And what you can do is you can take just another sheet and put like a background color on it of some sort. And then you can take those torn pieces and either using negative space or using the pieces to create something, make a flower, you know, make a sun, make a bird, but you can make something. And again, I don't think you have to worry about being told what to do. I think the kids are like, oh, I can do that. And they can make something with that. Along those lines with tearing, cutting with scissors. Kids love to cut with scissors. And obviously you want to get age appropriate scissors. But there's also fun ones that have like a little pattern that they can cut. Again, there's a lot of healing in just the process of cutting stuff up and then making it into something. That's healing. That's healing. Couple of other glue sticks, very important if you want to make a little bag of art for your car or something. Glue sticks. I like this purple one because it's purple and little kids can actually see where they put the glue. The watercolor that I get to do the abstract stuff with, if I'm doing a big piece of paper like the girl out at the ranch, I use this kind of watercolor ink. Otherwise, you can use those little pan watercolors and you can make a pretty nice abstract. Again, remember it's sensory. So there's a whole set of markers that have scent. You just have to be careful with little kids because they start to, even with Nancy, you have to be careful because I'll just start to color my nose. You do not want to let kids sniff Sharpies, just FYI. That's not a good plan. And permanent mark, but they do make this whole set of scented markers, which I think is so cool. Also, there's scented dough and there's scented crayons. And so anytime you can add another sense in to the materials, man, that's just bonus. That's bonus. All right, so here's just a few more things. This gets a little more complicated. This, I would say, is for your junior high, high school kids, but collage is so, you know, again, they will take off. If you just give them an idea like, hey, let's make a collage and let's make it all about where you see yourself 10 years from now or something like that. I mean, there's so many positive ways you can do that. But this is just an idea of taking, and you can use paint and collage together. And this says Experience West Texas if you can't read it. But so it's a combination, mixed media of paint and collage. And you know, if you can, even if you just have them paint the background, there's always going to be something about using paint that just brings another dimension to it. And then this is one, again, where they just did something using collage and paint. And, you know, to hear the story, that's what you want them to make something that's going to tell you a story. And so just encouraging things like that. Then this is just basically a splatter. You know, it's using a little bit of watercolor abstract. And one of the things, I just put tape around the edges so that it had a nice edge. And that's just like using blue painter's tape. But so you just do this thing, and then you, again, this is more on the messy side. You can use a toothbrush or to do some splatter art. And then you have the person look at it and turn it and turn it. And then when they see something, they can capture what they see in the painting. And so there was a dancer in this painting, and that was what was pulled out. But you don't, when you start, you don't have to know where you're going. So I think I've told you everything. So here's my final statement. Expressive arts therapy allows children to deal with trauma in the same deeply emotional way that they experienced it, which prepares them to address it more fully and heal. That's the bonus. We're not therapists. We're not trying to be I mean, they have counselors and that are professionals, but God's using us. He's using us with our children in a mighty and powerful way, more powerful than counseling in many cases. You are the person who can open the door to their heart, and they trust you, and you're that safe place for them. And so I am more than willing to help you guys in any way I can, any ideas. And if you guys are interested, Rebel said that she would be willing to create sort of an inventory of art supplies at the office, and that we could use one of the conference rooms to do art with our Casa Kids. So that's my story.
Well, Nancy, it's an amazing story. And one of the things you're going to have to do is put those quotes in an email for me so I can share, because I couldn't write that last one down fast enough. Of course, we have the recording. I guess I could go back and watch the recording too. But that is an amazing teaching. And I learned so much because I was thinking I had to draw with the kids, or I had to do the art with them. And being able just to let them go and read a book and say, now you draw the word that you hear. And
and they do like for you to do it with them, but never as competition. I mean, it's always like mine is usually half finished when they're finished.
Yeah.
Like I try and really make sure that I don't have something, because they want to excel, and I mean, when you turn on the creative juices in anybody, it's exciting, and we don't want to cause more trauma, and we don't want to be a place where they get, that, oh, I've done this wrong too. So the key is to listen and ask questions.
Yes.
And
we've had a couple people say they would love to take a session with you. So we might have to have a little in-house training over here so we can practice it. And I think it's just amazing that I love the way you said that trauma is very sensory. And so by engaging the senses, it gives them that outlet to express what they're feeling in a very tangible way. And I did want to follow up. You talked about the outcry. We have to be so careful that we're not, you were very clear to say, we're not their therapist. And so, but we're trying to give them an outlet to express what they're feeling inside and give you a way to connect with them. But if your child ever outcries anything that is new, that they've not already talked about before, or that they're not being, it's not part of their case, you remember your mandatory reporters, and we have to report that the appropriate way, which we'll talk about a different time. But I love the tools that you gave us. What questions do you have for Nancy?
I don't have a question, but I have something that I'm going to tell about Nancy Capra as an advocate. During spring break for Abilene, of course, this was leading right into all of the COVID stuff, but Nancy took one of her Casa Kids. We got permission. She took one of my Casa Kids, and she spent the week doing different kinds of service projects with them, including the art therapy. I started to put out an announcement and say, hey, does your Casa child need something to do during spring break? Call Nancy Capra. But I decided not to. So, but she's, yeah, what a heart.
Yes.
Thank you, Sandra. She likes me.
We all like you. So I did not say this. The picture in our conference room was painted by Nancy. She donated that to Big Country Casa, and it has, you can tell them a little bit about what's in it, Nancy.
Well, it's all based on Psalm 139. I do a process like this one up there, that real abstract one. I'll do that on these big sheets of paper, and I call them scripture inks. And as I'm doing them, if I don't know exactly what scriptures are going in, the Lord is kind of telling me what he's showing me in the colors and the way they're moving and that sort of thing. So that after it dries, after the watercolor part dries, I then embed the scripture into the curves and crevices of the paint. So if you look at the one at the Casa office, it's got all of Psalm 139 in it. And then as I'm embedding it, the Holy Spirit is also just kind of highlighting words. And those are the words that I will take the rubber stamps, and because I use Sharpie for most of it, and I just write pretty tiny. But if I feel like a word is being highlighted, I'll take my rubber stamps and I'll bring that word out. So you'll see some of the words are brought out in there. The other thing about scripture inks that's kind of fun is that there's 5 handprints within the painting, and 5 is the number that represents grace. And one of the reasons for that, I mean, there's lots of different reasons, again, Google, but if you think about our hands, we have 5 fingers on a hand, and when we reach out to God, he's reaching to us as well. And so I love the idea of the hands. And so in all my scripture inks, I have those 5 handprints somewhere in them.
Very cool. Well, guys, what questions do you have for Nancy before we get to door prizes and we release everyone? You can put them in the chat box. Nancy, someone did ask about, do we leave the artwork with the children?
Oh, yeah.
And my thought was yes, unless they want to give it to you, but.
No, I would say it's definitely theirs. And also sometimes I'll make up a little bag or container of art supplies for and I leave that with them too, as long as there's not glitter and glue in there. And you know, but usually it's got crayons, markers, pencils, maybe scissors, but that's a you gotta know your kid. Yeah, because we've got some cutters out there, and so you don't want to, you got to know them. But paper, erasers, pencils, what else? Straight edges, you know, rulers. You can make a little art pack and leave it with them.
Good. And I did that with my new case. I took her some adult coloring books and some of the watercolor marker pens and different things like that. And Nancy knows the story. We've been trying to connect through art a little bit, and then COVID happened and she acted out and she kind of lost all of her supplies. But so we're starting up some new things this week. But I think you gave us wonderful ideas, wonderful tips. It was inspiring to see how we can connect with our children and how we can really help them acknowledge the pain that they're in. And I think that's what so many of them, they need. We're their voice, right? So let's help them find their voice. And this does that. So thank you so much, Nancy.
Thank you.
So we're really excited to have a couple of we have a very cool door prize from Nancy. And then we have one more of our Chick-fil-A cards. So Nancy, well, actually, I don't want to do that. We're going to do one door prize because Nancy's is such a cool door prize that I just want to do the one. And it's what she's holding up now. So if you can't see, let me see if I can make it big. Can you all see that big? It's a little piece of her artwork. So Nancy, if you will pick a number between 1 and 12 for me.
7.
Lauren Parton. You are the winner. Woo! And Nancy, thank you so much. Nancy will either get that to us, or Lauren, if you want to message Nancy, we'll get that to you somehow. And I've recorded this. I'll send the link out. I know that Nancy would be available to give you some direction,
Absolutely.
answer questions. So guys, thank you so very much. Watch your emails today for that video that I'm going to send out, the link to the video that you can watch on self-care for first responders. Please take advantage of that and learn how to take care of yourselves. And then we will also send you some information for next week. But join me in giving Nancy a round of applause. They're all silent except mine and Sandra's, I think. But we really do appreciate you, Nancy. You did a fabulous job. So
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. I'm going to end the
meeting.
Day. Thank you, and we appreciate you so much. Bye, everyone. All right, Nancy, I'll email you. Thank you. You did a wonderful job.
Well, I hope I didn't go too much. That was sort of my prayer request from my life group. They were all praying for me to not say like or
You didn't, and
well,
it wasn't too long. It was perfect.
Great. Thank you, Rebel, so much. I enjoyed this, and have a fantastic day. And I'll get this art down to Casa.
All right. Thank you, my dear. We love you.
Love you too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. I got to stop